Hello and welcome to Sportsmole's live reaction to that 0-0 draw between Chelsea and Tottenham. Apologies, we're coming to you a little bit later than planned. We had a few gremlins in the system, but we're here now. We should be live. If you want to have your say and ask us any questions about the weekend's action or talking point, or you make your own points about the weekend's talking points and action, just on that number at the bottom of the screen, just send us a WhatsApp and we'll try and get to each of them. All right, Matt, let's get to the Chelsea-Tottenham game. 0-0. Who do you think will be the happier of the two managers after that one?
Oh, good question. I mean, would Lampard be that disappointed with a point? I don't think he would be too disappointed. Obviously, Mourinho, very, very happy with a point to go there. The team selection to go back to the top of the league with a point is obviously what he went there to do, and they bummed along quite nicely now. Tottenham, aren't they, sitting obviously at the top of the league, and it's obviously incredibly tight up there. But yeah, I just thought from the word go, to be honest, the first half was very safe performance. Chelsea had a little bit more of the ball in the second half, but Tottenham weren't really flying forward. Tottenham had a few chances early on, didn't they? Bergwijn had a couple of half chances, and they were moving the ball quite well through the lines. But a point each. I think we said in our predictions, didn't we? Obviously, both back draws, and we thought it'd be. And actually, you backed Tottenham to win, didn't you?
I backed the Tottenham win, yeah.
Yeah, I just thought it'd be a draw because I don't think either manager would it be a bad result for either. I think both would be quite happy with that, and move on to their next games.
Yeah, you mentioned those Bergwijn chances. I think that was Mourinho's tactics in a nutshell, wasn't it? Soak up, sit deep. We've seen it so many times when he goes to big six clubs. We've seen it all the time during his spell as Man United manager. He did it probably too often for Man United fans' liking. You might be able to say better than me on that one, but he has, for a lot of his managerial career, gone into these sorts of games with a mindset of don't lose this game before actually going on to win it. And I think personally the onus was more on Lampard to go out and get Chelsea to win the game. Tottenham obviously going back top of the table with a point. They're the away team, so getting a point at Stamford Bridge is never going to be a bad thing, especially considering their record at Stamford Bridge when we made our predictions. I then went on and actually did the preview, which obviously takes a little bit more in-depth research, and I saw quite how bad Tottenham's record at Stamford Bridge is, and it's unbelievably bad. So a point is not a bad result. Obviously, they need to get a win. I think they've only had one win in maybe even in the Premier League era at Stamford Bridge. It's that bad. So they'll be desperate to get that next win next time they get to Stamford Bridge in the Premier League next season. But I think a point for them going back top of the table is a much better result than it is for Chelsea. And I think Lampard, he won't be distraught at a point by any stretch of the imagination. The way Chelsea defended and the way Tottenham have been attacking, he'll be quite happy with keeping a clean sheet in particular in that game. But I think he perhaps maybe should have taken a few more risks. I think he sort of went into the game, obviously he knows Mourinho really well. I think he went into the game thinking, I know what Mourinho's going to try and do to us. He's going to try and sit back, hit us on the break, and I don't really want to fall into the plans. But I think if he maybe took a few more risks, attacked a bit more, and it was Chelsea who were looking like the team who wanted to win more than Tottenham. So it wasn't like they sat back as well and accepted the draw. But I think a few more risks, and that match was probably there for the taking for either team.
Yeah, I think that's a good point you make about the risk factor, isn't it? That, earlier on this season, we saw a very, very similar game at Old Trafford, Manchester United against Chelsea, and Lampard's tactics, we never really wanted to force the issue, not even at a stage when United were having, quite a lot of the ball and playing quite well. And very interesting thing for me for Chelsea this season is how they set up in the big games, because they're going to have to beat some of the big teams. They've lost this season, haven't they? To Liverpool, didn't they, early in the season at home, and Liverpool were much better. Obviously, drew United, and the problem with saying you're going to draw or take points off the bigger sides is there's so many of them around now. I mean, you're looking at Leicester, Southampton, teams like that have joined. If you like the sides that are very, very difficult to beat, and they're going to have to beat the teams. They're going to have to pick up points off Liverpool, off City, off Leicester, off United.
Yeah, because Liverpool and Man City are going to be doing that to each other as well, aren't they?
Exactly, that's the point. And it's all very well beating the fewest. Obviously, they've won the last three in the league before this one: Burnley, Sheffield United, Newcastle. And it's okay to beat those sides, and you will get high up the table beating those sides. But if you're going to take that next step, which if they want to do, and I mean, funny, they spent a lot of money, didn't they, in the summer? In a coronavirus hit market, they really did splash the cash. And yeah, for me, it'd be interesting moving forward. But, looking at Tottenham, I thought a lot of positives. I thought Ndombele was very good. Reminded me a lot of Moussa Dembele when he was at Tottenham, where he takes the ball, uses his body, and Joe Rodon had a nice solid game at the back as well. So, yeah, I think positives for Tottenham in that game.
Yeah. Any positives for Chelsea? What about what we were talking earlier about Tammy Abraham, or whether he's good enough to be the main centre forward of a title-winning team? Because there was a lot of talk before this with Liverpool's injury problems and dropping points against Brighton and Man City's really poor start to the season, that there is the door open for someone else outside those top two to really make a push for the title this season. Whereas that hasn't really been the case, certainly the last 2 seasons, maybe even 3 seasons. And Chelsea and Tottenham, on current evidence, look like they're at the very front of that queue. But I think whereas Tottenham have got world class, one of the best strikers in the world in Harry Kane, I think Chelsea, for all of their attacking reinforcements, you look at the number 9 in Tammy Abraham, those two-headed chances he missed. Is he good enough to spearhead a title-winning attack? I'm not too sure. I think if Werner was up there in number 9, and then you've got Pulisic coming back, Ziyech obviously on the other wing, and obviously Kai Havertz, you've got Mason Mount, you've got a host of attacking players that are really good there. That looks like a stronger attacking lineup for me. But Abraham, in fairness, had scored in his last two Premier League games before that, but for me, he's just not got that killer instinct. When you compare him to someone like Kane, it's just Kane's head and shoulders above the rest, isn't he?
Yeah, I think that's a good point, really, isn't it? I was just thinking when you were saying that, the teams that have won the league, previously, you feel like you need to have a top striker. Obviously, the exception to that is Liverpool, and I don't mean a top striker as in Firmino's not a top striker. I mean in terms of goals, he's not a goal machine, is he? But he's obviously got two wide players outside him that score for absolute fun. And City, obviously, the great sides of Aguero. And you look back, United, Rooney. You need a player, I think, that's going to really bag you over 20 goals a season. And would I be able to sit with confidence and say that Tammy Abraham's going to get more than 20 Premier League goals this season? I just don't think so. I don't think Giroud would either, to be fair. But I think Giroud is a real threat. He obviously came off and scored in the Champions League, didn't he, during the week? And he's still a big threat. He obviously wants to play. His agents come out and said that he said himself that he wants to play, and you can understand why, because he contributes a lot to the team. And yeah, for me, Abraham isn't good enough to win Chelsea the league, but is there enough around him? I don't think they'll win the league this season. But yeah, it was a good game in terms of. You mentioned it's been such a crazy season, the goals flying in, and in a weird way, it was nice to have a little bit of normality back, wasn't it? A game that we've seen over the years, a tight game, and sometimes 0-0s are a little bit more satisfying than 3-3s, just because a little bit of normality back, if you can say that.
Yeah, it was a big tactical battle, isn't it? And Lampard's actually got the better of Mourinho. I think it's twice in a row before this in the Premier League, and Mourinho had never lost 3 times in a row against a particular team or manager. So Lampard was out for history against his old boss today, but didn't quite manage that. And he also knocked United out of the cup a few years back with Derby, didn't he? I think so. Yeah, Lampard's had Mourinho's number a bit. So Mourinho, maybe that was again why Mourinho went in with these tactics. We're used to seeing them from him. The question, though, I think, is did we see either of these sides enhance their title credentials? Because we mentioned the door is now open for someone other than Liverpool or Man City, and these two at the front of the queue. Did you see enough from either team to suggest that they might be able to go on and win the title? I think you just mentioned not Chelsea, but how about Tottenham getting a point away to Chelsea?
It's a tough question. I think in seasons gone by, you'd probably say no, but I think in this season, obviously Liverpool injury problems, VAR problems, if you like, and Jurgen Klopp's obviously not too happy about that, which we'll speak about later. City's problems.
We will get to that for sure. Yes,
we will get to that. There'll be some, but yeah, City's problems as well. I mean, it's not. We've mentioned this before, haven't we, a few times. It's not going to be a 95-point season. You could win it with maybe 83, 84. 85 points maybe this season. Can Tottenham get to that standard? Obviously 21 points from 10 games is a really good return. Seems like they lost their first game as well, didn't they? Obviously since they beat United, they've been really, really good. Obviously it will depend on if they can keep Harry Kane and Son fit, and whether Bale can contribute maybe a little bit more in the final third. But are they good enough defensively? I'll probably have to say no, but like I say, this season, I wouldn't be overly surprised if they launched a title challenge purely because the teams around them. It's almost like when Leicester won it. They won it because obviously they were fantastic, but the other top teams around them had real issues at that stage. And if you're going to win it, you feel like it will be this season, because you feel like next season, next summer, big teams are going to spend again. The world will be a little bit more normal, and season after will hopefully obviously be, let's hope, back to crowds and normality and stuff. So if they're going to win it, Tottenham, they probably have to win it this season.
Yeah, I think the reservations I've had, I've said about Tottenham already. They're still prone to the odd game where they might drop points where they wouldn't be expected to. But as you say, most teams are going to do that this season. I think that's certainly what's undermined past title challenges, and could undermine this season. Obviously, we say that now, but they've been in great form so far and deservedly sit top of the table, more than a quarter of the way through the season. So they're doing fantastically, and they're doing everything they can really to prove that wouldn't be the case. But it wouldn't be too much of a surprise if we see more games like that opening day defeat to Everton, maybe even like that loss to Antwerp in the Europa League. Those odd games which they lose, which the likes of Liverpool and Man City just haven't been losing in recent seasons. There hasn't really been room for those types of slip-ups. And so far, Tottenham haven't suffered really another one, certainly in the league since the opening day. But apart from obviously they threw 3 goals away against West Ham from 3-0 lead to draw 3, all those are 2 drop points. And they'll be looking back at those occasions and be thinking, right, without those drop points, that should have never happened against West Ham for sure. They'll be clear at the top of the table in terms of points rather than just goal difference. So they'll certainly look back and say they should have more points than they do have on the board, and that will only give them more confidence. But I think for me, the reservation is still that they might drop points in that odd games where the likes of Liverpool might not.
Yeah, I think it's about trust, isn't it? As it were, we've used United and Arsenal before. Can you really trust them in the big games? It'll be obviously fascinating to see. You look on paper, they've got Tottenham's team. It's not. You've got the team. You don't look at it and think, "Well, it's an outstanding team." Centre backs today, Roden and Dyer. Obviously, Dyer's had his problems in the past. Højbjerg, they got from Southampton, who fell out there. He's been a wonderful player, unbelievable side on paper. Superstars in the final third. That will, whether they do obviously ultimately come through and then pick up silverware this season. Remember to leave your WhatsApp comments, send them in, any questions you have, or on the YouTube video, and we shall get to them. But should we move on, Barney, on the Tottenham game? Or
I think we've said everything that needs to be said about that game. Unfortunately, it wasn't a thriller, but we've got plenty of other talking points for the rest of the week, and I think we start with Jurgen Klopp's post-match interview, where it was unbelievable. I've never really seen anything like that. It was remarkable to see him and the interviewer Des Kelly go head to head like that, and there was points being made on both sides, which sort of were good points which need to be made, and I think there's certainly an argument that needs to be had there. What's your stance on that? The scheduling, and because obviously we're both fans of Champions League clubs, we're both fans of clubs who have quite recently had an 8 p.m. Wednesday game in the Champions League and then the 12:30 game in Saturday. And I don't think Klopp's saying he shouldn't be playing on Saturday. It's just he doesn't really see a reason why it has to be the 12:30 game. What's your stance on that?
Yes, it's a difficult one, isn't it? There's a lot of different facets that go into it. I suppose obviously people were saying maybe it should have been the Everton Leeds game at 12:30, but obviously BT want the big games. They want the one that's drawing. They want Liverpool to be in there, and Liverpool, Manchester United are always going to be the big viewers. So the 12:30 game is a prime time for the game. I think United played Istanbul, didn't they, away earlier this month, and then played Everton. And Ole Gunnar Solskjaer came out after the game and was very upset about that. He obviously. Not to the extent where there was a massive debate like there was with Klopp, but he obviously was, incredibly upset about that.
I remember Klopp mentioning it in one of his post-match interviews when it happened to United, and obviously it's the Liverpool-United rivalry, but he spoke out then and said it was out of order for United to be playing those 2 matches.
Yeah, City did it early this season as well. Wednesday, Saturday, 12:30 kickoff in the Champions League. And it's obviously it's not ideal, is it? I suppose the one thing you would say, Liverpool were at home. It's not like they had a huge trip back, but I think the point would be, if Liverpool's injuries weren't as bad as they are right now, would there be so much debate? Because you're obviously losing players left, right and centre, and it's obviously not ideal. But is it great from Klopp to come out and say that? I'm not sure. I'm not sure about the Chris Wilder comments as well, a little bit. I didn't think they really needed to be made. It was a little bit... And I think the point is he does get a reputation as a bad loser, Klopp, and I think that's probably fair. He's obviously won a lot with Liverpool, but when things don't go his way, maybe he is a little bit... toys at the pram, certain to extent, maybe a little bit harsh, but it's an interesting one. It's obviously a lot of different opinions, but it was nice to see a debate about it, and obviously both sides tried to get their point across.
Yeah, and I think the point you make on injuries, would he be so frustrated if he didn't have the injury problems? I think the fact that he has had so many injury problems, he's pointed towards that sort of scheduling as a way to stop that. Obviously, Milner had a hamstring injury last in that match. Naby Keita had a hamstring injury the match before that. We've seen more injuries than ever before, I think, in the Premier League at this stage of the Premier League season. And that's obviously because this is a season like no other. We're cramming more games into less time than we ever have before. We didn't have a pre-season, so there's naturally going to be more injuries. And I think the frustration comes with the fact that there needs to be a few concessions made. Everything else is different. There can be a few concessions made with the kick-off times and which teams are there. And I do get that it's very complicated. I mean, BT, not for 1 second suggesting that they should give up having Liverpool or showing Liverpool on TV, because they paid for that. The money they've paid, I'm looking at some figures at the moment, is £9.2 million, I think it is. They paid per match for Saturday 12:30 slot, which is £100,000 a minute. They're paying huge money for that, and that's the money which lets Liverpool go and buy players and pay those wages, same as the other Champions League clubs. So for not 1 second am I suggesting BT should show Leeds Everton instead of Liverpool, because obviously they've paid for Liverpool, they should get them. But that deal was also made a long time before coronavirus, before this crazy season we're having, where players are being forced into so many games. So I think there should be concessions made, whether Sky maybe get the 12:30 game and show Leeds Everton, and then BT get 5:30 to show Liverpool, for example. There can be concessions made, and I think the flexible nature of it extends up until these kick-off time slots that they've got at the moment. And I think that is where the frustration is coming for Klopp, because he thinks they should be more. And I'm sure there is a way. And again, there's knock-on effects of this in the Champions League as well, because certain teams have to play at certain times because you can't play in the same city and everything like that. But I'm sure there's a way to make it so most of the time, whoever plays on Tuesday in the Champions League plays on Saturday domestically, on Wednesday and Sunday, or even later on Saturday. Because next week Liverpool have got Tuesday and they're not playing until Sunday night, whereas the two teams who played in the Champions League on Tuesday this week have played today on Sunday, whereas the two teams who played on Wednesday in the Champions League have played on Saturday. So I'm sure there is, and I know it is obviously a very complicated issue with loads of different moving parts, but I'm sure there's a better way to do it in terms of player welfare, because I think that needs to come higher up the priority list than it is at the moment.
Yeah, it's a difficult one, player welfare, because obviously, relatively speaking, in terms of football, it is important. But I suppose in the wider world right now, a lot of people would come and say, footballers playing, Wednesday, Saturday is very, minimal on the list of, other things that are going on in the world, and they are paid very handsomely to do that. It boils down to money. It's obviously a Premier League issue, but the fact that BT, they mentioned those figures, they pay, top dollar to have that, and it does boil down to money at the end of the day. It's unfortunate, but that is the name of the game, and yeah, you can understand why the frustrations as well. But it's not just a Liverpool issue. It's other clubs have had it this season, and obviously it will happen again because of the way things are with scheduling and things like that. But like you say, yeah, there is surely something that could happen, but you're never going to please everyone. So it's a very difficult subject.
Yeah, there's certainly a balance to strike between, obviously you mentioned the money aspect of it, and that is always going to rule in football. It'd be naive to suggest otherwise, but I think the player welfare, I do think, needs to come higher up the list, and part of that is the 5 subs, which is another talking point. Obviously you mentioned Klopp's digs at Chris Wilder. Chris Wilder had a few digs at him as well, and that's mainly over the 5 sub rule, which I think I'm right in saying we were both pretty opposed to when it was first floated at the start of the season. Wonder if your opinion on that has changed at all. Do you reckon 5 subs should be brought in, considering how many injuries we've had so far this season?
I don't personally like the 5 sub rule, to be honest. That's just speaking from probably a fan point of view. I just don't think it. The games are very. It's almost like when you do pre-season games, with work and things like that, and suddenly they bring on 4 subs at once. And I know that doesn't happen a lot here. It doesn't. Sometimes there'll be two, and I think Klopp even said that. He doesn't want 5 subs so he can just make 5 in a row. He wanted to take Robertson off yesterday and bring on the new left back, because just to give him a bit of freshness. It's nothing about changing tactically or trying to gain an advantage on the other side. It's purely for freshness. I don't personally like it, but it does suit the bigger clubs, because the bigger squads, the better players. If you're suddenly bringing on, it happened a lot last season, didn't you? United, Liverpool, City could suddenly bring on 2 world-class players when you're playing against a Sheffield United or a Burnley, who have almost been running to the ground, and they're 4th or 5th best players in terms of being on the bench, and obviously nowhere near the standard that the bigger clubs to bring on. So it's a difficult one. I think obviously it may be a 15-5, 16-4 split in the Premier League in terms of what for and against, using that rule. But I don't personally like it. But if it was brought in, you could completely understand why.
Yeah, I was against it for exactly those reasons you mentioned there. I think it gives an unfair advantage to the big teams. But when you see these injuries happening, and it's happening not just to the big teams who are playing every 3 days, it's happening to some of the, with respect, smaller teams in the league as well. So I think it is something which is back on the table to be looked at. I think there will certainly be more support for it now, having seen the amount of injuries. And I think there probably should be, because as you say, it's not really to get a tactical advantage. It is a difficult balancing act because there will be an obvious advantage. The big teams do have, better depth and bigger squads. But again, it's a balance with player welfare. I think the 5 subs rule, it's not one I was particularly in favour of, but I am more in favour of it now because so many players are getting injured, and it's possible to avoid that. And I think the strangest thing when you look at it is it's allowed in the Champions League, it's allowed in Europa League, it's allowed in pretty much every other domestic league around at the moment. It's allowed in internationals. The only place it's really not allowed is the Premier League, which makes it even more strange. If every other league was sticking to 3 subs, then fine, but it also puts these Champions League clubs at a little bit of a disadvantage in the Champions League itself because every other team's been able to make 5 subs every weekend.
Yeah, I suppose it obviously suits the bigger clubs as well because managers can keep players happier, can't they? If you're going to bring on 3 players, today, for example, United against Southampton, they've obviously brought a goalkeeper off the bench, brought Henderson on, and then it leaves Solskjaer with only 2 changes to make. And, maybe on another day, he might have very late on, obviously, went on to win the game in the end, but very late on, he could have brought on a Daniel James or a Mata or someone like that, obviously taken away from them, and it'd have given them more games. So it's probably easier for the managers, but yeah, not for me personally, but like I say, it's obviously a very good talking point.
Yeah, and if you want to have your say, remember you can WhatsApp us on that number at the bottom of the screen or comment in the YouTube video, and we'll talk about that. All right, moving on. I'm afraid we've got to talk about VAR again. I'm growing more and more frustrated by it, I'd have to say. I think I've always been in favour of giving it a chance, but it's just been used wrongly, and there's an argument, obviously, to say the laws are wrong, but I think it's coming into pretty much every facet of the game now, and the game's being re-refereed. But obviously the main talking point this weekend is that Danny Welbeck penalty, which I think if you slow it down and view it 5 times, you can see why it was given. But in actual play, anyone who's played football will know that's not a penalty. I think even the Brighton players admitted it wasn't a penalty. Even Welbeck, who won it, admitted it was soft. He tried to knock it round him. Robertson, he blocked the ball with one foot, obviously caught him with the other when you see it in slowed down. But I think it's just, with offsides, there is the argument that it's either black or white, but I think that also needs amending because we've seen the Bamford one, even the Salah one against Brighton was minimal, and I think there needs to be a little bit margin for error because we've completely lost the benefit of the doubt for the attacker right now, which was always the line. The benefit of attack should go to the attacker, the benefit of doubt, sorry, to get us more goals. When VAR's taken away from the game, it's taken me a while to make my mind up firmly on VAR, but I'm very anti it now. I hate it. I think it's ruining the spectacle of football quite a lot.
It's an interesting one. If it's used in the right way, I do like it. But like mentioned, there's so many different. I suppose with offside, what I would say is it's almost like when you see the lines drawn and that you can explain why they're offside. There is a certain understanding of why players are offside under these new rules. You can see, offside with the penalties and VAR. It's still an opinion, isn't it? It's still the VAR. It's still an opinion. Obviously, the referees have been sent over to the monitor a lot more. Obviously, this season to use that a lot more, and I do like that part of the game. But it's still an opinion, isn't it? The Robertson one was. I don't know. I don't think it was a penalty, but I can half understand. He still kicked him, hasn't he? It's still a little bit late. I understand what you're saying in terms of, it's not anyone who's played the game, it's not a penalty, but you can sort of understand that there's contact in the box. It's not like he's dived over or it's one of those that's, completely outrageous. There's a little bit of contact and he's given. And I'll be interested to see if that was, if Liverpool would have got that, and they got a lot of them last season, whether you'd be upset about it then. But maybe that's another talk for another day.
Right, I would be, because it's given in slow mo, and you can't be refereeing games in retrospect in slow mo. It needs to be in the aspect of the game, and obviously the fact that Welbeck came out after and said it was soft, admitted it, and the Brighton players said it wasn't a penalty. I just it's a dangerous road to go down when you start looking at those ones and giving penalties. When I think if that didn't get given, no one would have mentioned it again. There wouldn't have been a single, complaint about it from the Brighton players. Where we wouldn't be talking about it now. It just would have gone down as, not even a replay given for that. So for VAR to come in and re-referee every part of the game like that, I think it's gone too far. When it came in, it promised not to detract from the game. It promised not to re-referee the game, and I think it is doing exactly that at the moment, which is increasingly frustrating. And as I say, with offsides, I think you're right to mention you can explain why it's offside. I think the rules in that aspect, I think the rules need changing with things like Bamford's one, which was an absolute joke how we can point to somewhere. But even then, I think the rules need changing quite drastically. I think Arsene Wenger actually wants daylight, which might be a little bit far. But even Mane's header, which he's leaning offside, obviously his head's quite way offside, and you can see that. But his feet are quite far behind the last defender. So it's all about body position there rather than gaining an advantage as an attacker by standing behind the last man, the last defender. I think that needs a serious look at. But I would certainly get rid of VAR for things like handballs. We've seen some joke decisions, and some of those penalties decisions we've seen this season have also been jokes. I really want to get rid of it. I can't see that ever happening now. I think it's here to stay. But it's going to be very hard to perfect it because at the moment it's causing more problems. And we do say when VAR is used well, it is good for the game, but we're seeing a lot more poor decisions which are taking goals away and taking the enthusiasm and enjoyment of football away. We're seeing a lot more of those decisions than we are decisions where we actually think, all right, that's VAR used well.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? You say that there's certain games where you might hear someone say, "Oh, it's been used quite well today, VAR," because it's almost the exception to the rule, which is not a good place to be in. We've got a question via WhatsApp from Mikey. To what extent do you think the Premier League table is incorrect due to VAR? I mean, it's an interesting question of where things would be, if those decisions wouldn't have happened. Obviously, there's been a lot of teams have had them this season. I wouldn't say it's been particularly unfair to one club. I don't know your opinion. Obviously, United have had a few this season that gone against them, a few for them. Liverpool recently. I mean, there's been a few, but it'd be interesting to see what the table was like if that was taken out and it was just purely down to the referees' decisions.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I don't have the stats to hand, but I did see one the other day of saying VAR calls which have gone against teams, and Liverpool have had 8 this season. I think next most is 5 or 4. So there was obviously the Liverpool dig at us last season, but I think it's gone in the opposite direction this time. It feels like, because I can list a few right now, Virgil van Dijk, nothing getting given against Pickford for that. The winning goal from Henderson, Mane being offside just by his sleeve. You've got the one from Brighton, 2 disallowed goals against Brighton. All right, they're offside, so you can understand them a bit more. There's a lot of VAR decisions which do seem to go against Liverpool, and obviously I recognise I'm going to know them more than notice them more than others because I'm watching every Liverpool game. I'm a Liverpool fan, and Liverpool certainly aren't the only team to have been hit by them. But it does seem, I'd say, without VAR this season, I'd be confident to say Liverpool will be top of the league by a distance, with Van Dijk still fit as well.
Yeah, but listen, I think that's the problem. That's why Liverpool get stick, and I think that's unfortunately the problem why Liverpool.
But I don't think that's unfair to say this season because we have had a lot of them.
Listen, you've had a few, and a lot of teams have had a few, and you had a lot go in your favour last season, and you had no injuries last season, and a lot went in your favour, and you won the league, and that was very, very good. But back to reality in terms of injuries, decisions that go against you, and suddenly Liverpool, listen, is second in the league, so it's joint top, so it's not a bad situation to be in, but it's maybe a little bit more level, and maybe you were due a few this season. I would say that.
Well, not this many. The injury crisis has been crazy. Most clubs wouldn't have had to put up with that, but obviously that's just the way things go a lot of the time. The VAR decisions, there's been a lot of ones, and as I say, it's not just Liverpool. That Bamford one stands out to both of us, I think, as an example of the offside rule just being completely wrong. It's a crazy rule, how someone can be pointing, his arm can be offside even though he can't score with it, just because his sleeve went down, an inch longer than someone else's back foot was down. I think that was a joke decision. I think there have been a lot of decisions which could have gone the other way with VAR, or would have gone the other way without VAR rather. I noticed the Liverpool ones more because I'm a Liverpool fan, but I think certainly without VAR this season, Liverpool would be top of the league, I think.
Interesting. Yeah, obviously the United Southampton game earlier, that it was nice to not have controversy in that game. In terms of VAR, it was maybe a little bit more old school in terms of that, which was, like I say earlier, what I mentioned it's maybe a little bit like that this season when you get a game where nothing happens and there's no VAR decisions. It's almost like, cool, and that's not a good place to be in. I don't think in terms of entertainment, obviously it's not great, but yeah, Liverpool, like I say, have had a few last season, but they're still sitting second in the league, and it's actually incredibly tight up there, isn't it? There's 3 points between Leicester in 4th and Tottenham in 10th, and talk about United's start to the season this season. They're 5 points off the top of the league, a game in hand. So it's incredible, isn't it? The teams that have lost, obviously Arsenal had a poor start, but they win. They win tonight. I think they've just kicked off, haven't they, against Wolves? If they were to win that game, they fly up. So I mean, it's going to be a very interesting season because it's very tight up there at the minute.
Yeah, that is crazy when you think about it, that United could win their game in hand and go 2 points off the top of the table when you consider how some of the poor results they've had so far this season. Obviously that win against Southampton, you must have been buzzing about that. Going back to VAR, you probably wouldn't be able to celebrate that goal until it got actually passed through VAR, because that winning goal, which takes a bit of the enthusiasm away from football. But it was a great comeback in the second half, to be fair to United. I think first half I was looking at the potential talking points, and it was James Ward-Prowse maybe for England. Does he deserve that? Because it was another stunning free kick from him and a great assist. But obviously the talking point from that is the comeback, and Cavani coming off the bench and inspiring that. I think you mentioned during our podcast you thought he should start. Do you think him and Van der Beek as well, obviously first chance, do you think they deserve more starting chances?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was very surprised to see Cavani not in the side, especially with Martial obviously being taken ill overnight. Obviously a late decision for him not to play, and to see him on the bench was a surprise. But maybe he felt like in this game it was more of a game for pace in terms of stretching. To be fair, United played quite well in the first half. They were unfortunate. James Ward-Prowse, fantastic free kick. Defending from a set piece was poor. But Cavani is just his movement's so good. His touch is really good. I mean, he scored 356 goals, professional goals in his career in 594 games. That's an awful lot, isn't it? Now he's got 3 in 5 league games for United this season, and he's just a proper centre forward, isn't he? The goals he scored were, I mean, for me personally, I love those sort of goals. Very, in the box. Hernandez used to score a lot of them when he was at United. In terms of very, very difficult chances. Comes and that's maybe where a Rashford or someone like that lacks. He wouldn't really score goals like that. It almost has to be a spectacular finish. But fantastic comeback from United. Like you say, puts them in a very good position in the table. Suddenly they've won their last 3 in the league. Not playing particularly well. Certainly not against West Brom. Quite good against Everton, and that incredible away run, which is just keeps going on, doesn't it? And it's incredible, really, form on the road. And if they can translate some of that at home, then maybe they could, push top 4. Not a title challenge, not yet, but into the top 4.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned that away record. United have never ever won 8 league away games in a row, I think it is, which, when you consider the great teams they've had down the years, is exceptional that they've managed to do that here. We've had a WhatsApp, and if you want to get in touch, read that number on the screen below and get in touch with us on WhatsApp, or comment below on the YouTube video. So you've just said you think Cavani be in the starting lineup on a more regular basis. Do you think he will be, or do you think he's seen as an impact sub by Ole Gunnar Solskjaer?
It's a good question. It's obviously one to watch, isn't it, in the weeks coming forward. Obviously, United play PSG, don't they, in the Champions League, and it's going to fancy Martial might be back for that game. Not too sure yet, and then they play West Ham away next weekend, and as well as West Ham are playing this season, that's going to be a really, really difficult game. And he's going to play his way into the side. I think he will. He's obviously, I mean, speak about his age, but I mean, he's not like he's 36, 37. He's 33 years old. He's obviously still an exceptionally fit man. You can tell the way he carries no body fat at all, does he? He's incredibly lean. He moves well. He's obviously not got the pace of a Rashford or Greenwood, but if he keeps scoring goals, he keeps playing as well. Martial's not playing well this season. No goals in 5 Premier League games and struggling elsewhere. So for me, he'd play himself in. And I think Fernandes liked playing with him as well. Almost felt like when Cavani came off the bench, obviously Fernandes scored again. That's 10 goals in 14 games for Fernandes this season. And I think like he feeds off Cavani, quality, likes playing with quality. And they're obviously two top draw footballers.
Yeah, I think with Cavani, the one thing you are pretty much guaranteed with him is goals. He's going to score. You might not offer as much as he used to in the general build-up play and in the general match outside the penalty area, but he gets into those positions. He's always loved that dart to the near post, doesn't he, to get that header on it, whether he's even defending or attacking, obviously. I think he does guarantee goals in a similar way. Obviously, it's an obvious comparison to make, but him and Zlatan Ibrahimovic, when he came to United towards what we thought towards the end of his career, he's obviously still going strong in Serie A at the moment, but it's a similar comparison to him. I think he will, if he keeps scoring goals, I think he has to start, because he's going to get, if he gets a certain amount of minutes, he's going to get a certain amount of goals with someone like Cavani, because he's deadly inside the box, and he's got people around him like Rashford, Fernandes in particular at the moment, Greenwood obviously, who are going to create chances for him. So personally, I think he probably warrants a run in the first team, but I think Solskjaer's maybe looking a bit further down the line. How long's Cavani going to be there? Anthony Martial was obviously a lot younger and was in good form last season, so he's not just going to suddenly relegate him down the pecking order completely. But certainly with the games coming thick and fast, I can see Cavani getting quite a few more starting opportunities in the next few weeks.
Yeah, it's funny you should mention Ibrahimovic. Actually, speaking about him earlier, I mean, he's got 10 goals in 6 Serie A games this season. You know, you say we thought he was coming to the end. He had that awful knee injury, but just, it shows that, like you mentioned, it's not like Cavani. Like I said, he's not like he's really at the last stage of his career. Obviously, he is in the final stages of it, but you feel like he could contribute. And like you mentioned, he's not going to be running the lines. He's not going to be, he's going to be playing in almost like that box. He will come short, take the ball, but he's not going to be doing that for 90 minutes. Whether he can do that, maybe coming off the bench is the right way to go about it for now, purely with obviously the tired legs in a lot of Premier League clubs and Champions League clubs. The PSG game will be very interesting to see if he's in that starting 11, because I feel like United will try and stretch them. They've done that to PSG both games. Used pace in the final third, which obviously isn't Cavani's game, but he's there's a lot of talk about whether he's going to be a good signing for United, but he's obviously come up trumps. I still think United have got issues at the back. One that I would highlight is Wan-Bissaka at the back. As good as I think he can be defensively, he's only got 4 assists in 59 games for United, and his inability, I think, to provide an outlet down the right is an issue, in my opinion. I was looking at other stats. Alexander-Arnold, 38 assists in 145 games, and obviously I'm picking, arguably the best attacking right back certainly in the Premier League, one of the best in Europe. But I still think contribution from, I think Telles has done well down the left, it's coming to the side, but contribution down the right side of attack is still an issue for United inside Sancho over the summer. And I still think if they're going to take that next step, they do need to iron out a few issues, certainly in the right area of the field.
Yeah, there's been a bit of a worrying scenario in the Arsenal-Wolves clash. David Luiz and a Wolves player, I think it was Raul Jimenez, seems to have clashed heads, and Jimenez seems to be knocked out for about 4 minutes now, which is a bit concerning. So we'll keep an eye on that. Hopefully Jimenez is okay. David Luiz is bloody, but seems to be in a better way than Jimenez at the moment. So we'll keep an eye on that one. All right, so we talked about United there. Let's go to Man City now. Burnley at home seems to be their favourite fixture. I think it's now 4 seasons in a row they've won that exact fixture 5-0, which is an incredible record, only been done once before in the history of English football. 5-0 winners, having really struggled for goals before that. It's an emphatic victory. Burnley have obviously struggled this season, but do you reckon Man City might now be back to their best after such a poor start to the season?
Yeah, I think now we mentioned it, didn't we, in the podcast? I think they're getting back fit now, aren't they? In terms of that Nathan Ake was out of the game, but apart from that, they were obviously very full strength, and obviously Aguero. If they can get him back firing again, obviously they need players to step forward. I think Ferran Torres has been very, very good this season. Obviously, Jesus is back fit now. Mahrez got a hat-trick. They've got a lot of quality in the final third. Sterling and Bernardo Silva didn't even get on the pitch in that game, and they still managed to hit Burnley for 5. And 5-0 against Burnley has been a good scoreline, hasn't it, for City in recent seasons. And I do expect them to move up the league. They're 9th at the moment, 6 points off the top. They've got a game in hand over Tottenham, so you would expect them. I mean, I personally have said that I don't think City will win the league this season. Would you go against that? Do you think they've got enough now without adding in January to win the league?
Well, from what we've seen so far this season, you'd have to say no, because they seem a lot easier to get at. They seem to be dropping a lot more points than. I still regard them mainly because of the 2 seasons where they won the league, and and obviously that's a few seasons ago. I still regard them as probably the most talented squad in the league, or most talented first 11. Liverpool obviously very close to that. So I think they've certainly still got the capabilities. It wouldn't be a surprise if they would beat anyone in the league, even Liverpool, by 5-0 any week. They've still got that sort of quality, and you can never count a team like that out of the title race. But the fact that they've dropped 12 points already this season, and you'd have to think on that basis they're going to drop quite a few more over the course of the rest of the season. I think their title challenge might depend on how many points the likes of Liverpool, Tottenham, Chelsea, those teams who are already quite a bit clear of them how many points they drop over the course of the rest of the season as well, because Man City certainly are going to drop more points. And they need to get the likes of De Bruyne back to his very best, because last season he was sensational. Even though Man City finished 18 points off the pace, he was sensational. So far this season hasn't been quite as good, but he's certainly against Burnley started looking back to his former self. I think he got two assists in that one. So if they can get those players, as you say, Aguero didn't play in that game, partially maybe to do with the death of Diego Maradona, his former father-in-law, but also I think he had a bit of an injury or illness, I think it was, overnight. So he won't be too far until he's back, and if they can get him fit and firing again, obviously he's still one of the best number 9s in the Premier League, so that'll be a huge boost to them. I can see them getting stronger. I don't see their form from the first 8 games of the season carrying on from over the course of the rest of the season, so they'll certainly improve. They'll certainly be up there. They've got a mountain to climb. They've got a big gap of points to make up, and I think whether they can do that will depend on how the likes of Liverpool, Chelsea, Tottenham, and those teams we're talking about in the title race now, how they fare and how many points they drop.
Yeah, it's going to be absolutely fascinating title race. Just want to look at the back to the Wolves game, Barney. I think this doesn't seem to be good at all for Jimenez. Looks like the camera's cut away. He's been stretchered off the field now, and that looks, doesn't look good at all. So obviously wish him all the best for that one. And it's going to be hard now, isn't it, for the Wolves players to pick themselves up. It's always difficult, isn't it, to see a teammate and the Arsenal players in that sort of discomfort. So obviously we wish him the best for that. But we've actually got a question, another WhatsApp question about Dean Henderson. Going back to, I suppose this is almost an England point as well as a Manchester United point, isn't it? Because if Dean Henderson can have a run in the United team, it puts himself right in England contention, doesn't he? Because Jordan Pickford's form has been, indifferent at best during stages, and obviously with De Gea getting injured, came into the side for the second half. Was nice and tidy, didn't have too much to do, but good handling. And obviously Henderson was waiting for De Gea to pick up an injury, because that was really the only way he was going to get in, unless De Gea had a real howler, a couple of poor games. And it'll be now very, very interesting if De Gea is fit against PSG, whether he comes straight back in or Henderson now gets a run.
Yeah, maybe for PSG, Henderson will get a run because it's the Champions League, and maybe he's more likely to get them for the cup competitions, isn't he? But I think in the Premier League that will be an interesting one. I think probably De Gea will still be his number 1 if he hadn't had the injury. Obviously, he wouldn't have been taken off, and Dean Henderson wouldn't have had that 45 minutes. And I don't know if Dean Henderson necessarily showed enough in the 45 minutes through no fault of his own. Whether he's got enough to usurp a fit De Gea in the Premier League side. So I think he'll probably need a few more chances, but as he gets them in the cup competitions, all he can carry on doing is keep taking them. I think with England, I think Pickford, we talk about England's chance of winning a major tournament. I don't think you're winning a major tournament with Pickford in goal. He had a good game against Leeds, made a few good saves, but he's always prone to that errors, and he's always got that error in him. And it seems to come in different ways. Sometimes he spills the ball, sometimes he comes out too rashly, sometimes he gives the ball away in distribution. So there's not even really one area of his game he can work on. It's probably concentration more than anything, to be fair, if you're going to pinpoint one area of the game. So I think England do need another goalkeeper if they're going to make that next step up to be contenders for a major competition. And when you look at the next in line is Nick Pope and Dean Henderson, but Henderson obviously needs more first team opportunities, and whether he'll get that, you're probably a better one to answer than that one if you think he deserves more of them. I don't also know if you think De Gea could have done any more with the 2 Southampton goals. Obviously the free kick was sensational, but De Gea did get a good hand to it. Personally, I don't think he could have done too much more, because the quality of the free kick was so good. But I did see some people claiming he probably should have saved that, having got to it and got a good hand to it.
No, not for me. I'm with you on that one. I think it was a very, very good free kick. Wasn't in the postage stamp, but it was very, very good. It was the side of the wall as well, and I think the wall I don't think was great there. It was obviously a poor decision as well from Fred to give the free kick away there, and I don't think he'd have done too much. And like you say, I agree with you. I do think De Gea will play against West Ham. The PSG game is maybe a little bit easier for Solskjaer to leave one out, but in terms of the West Ham game, obviously you don't look like it's going to be a serious injury for De Gea. Look more of an impact, doesn't it? It might be a bit sore for the next couple of days, but you would expect they'll come back into the side. And to be fair, De Gea's performances this season have been a lot better. There was a few, obviously more than a few last season, and Henderson coming back into the squad has certainly, raised De Gea's level. I do think Henderson is going to be a very, very good goalkeeper. I do think he's got the potential to be their number 1. Whether that comes as soon as and often as he likes, as often as he wants it to be, and as soon as he wants it to be, is probably another question, because I don't know how many opportunities he will get. But coming on today, and obviously putting in a really solid second half. And he'll hope that, in the nicest possible way, he won't hope that De Gea's injured, but he'll hope that maybe he's got a sore knee for another week so he can play against West Ham. But it's obviously an interesting talking point. But I think we're back underway, aren't we, in the Wolves game, which is good to see. Obviously Jimenez has gone off to hospital, it looks like. So wish him all the best for that one. And it'll be interesting to see how that game unfolds.
Yeah, we wish him well. Obviously, a big loss to Wolves. That is, he's a key part of their team, obviously. So it depends how long he's out for. Obviously, a head injury looks like it's going to be at least 10 days with concussion. So hopefully they can get him back as soon as possible. All right, let's go to the other end of the table. West Brom versus Sheffield United was a huge game, obviously, at the bottom of the table. The two winless teams remaining. West Brom won that one 1-0. Sheffield United still 1 point from 10 games. We've said it week after week on the podcast that they need to start picking up points sooner rather than later, and they've obviously got the team which pretty much unchanged from the one which did so well in their debut season, but they're in big trouble now, aren't they?
Yeah, real trouble. That was a big result, wasn't it, in that one? I think obviously we both back draws, didn't we, in that one with the in the podcast, but you just felt like it was what I did say and what I was saying now in terms of West Brom is I felt like against United at Old Trafford, you did feel like there was signs they did restrict United and they did play quite well. And obviously Conor Gallagher, a player I picked out, obviously on loan from Chelsea, and a really, really bright player. I think they've got a real gem there on loan this season, West Brom, and moving forward, Chelsea in the future. Obviously came up with the only goal of the game, and you just felt like Sheffield United couldn't lose that game. I mean, picking up a draw wouldn't have been great, but to lose that game and to have a record of 9 defeats from 10 games this season it's terrible, isn't it? It's not like they're 5 points off West Brom now, so it's not like they're, in terms of they're not down, but you just felt like it, didn't you, for confidence. And as you know, confidence is, because it's the same squad essentially, isn't it, that did so well, and confidence is maybe not the biggest thing. Obviously you need talent and you need ability and things like that, but in terms of football, to be confident and flying and picking up results, and they're just in a rut, aren't they? And you really struggle to see where the next points are coming from. And I mean, I think they're real danger of going down. If you had to say right now, would you back them to go down, Sheffield United?
It's a difficult one because I said in the podcast that you've got those 4 teams, and I think the rest above them are sort of pulling away a little bit, or maybe not in points, but I think in performances you can see them getting more points than the bottom 4 currently. So obviously 3 of them are going down and 1 staying up. Still at this stage, I might just back Sheffield United to stay up out of those 4, and maybe Burnley to go down along with West Brom and Fulham. But we're more than a quarter way through the season now. You can't really say that much longer. If they don't start picking up points, don't even have to be wins at this stage, just points on the board, then it's going to get tougher and tougher for them. It's one of the worst starts we've seen in the Premier League history, and I think they created a lot of chances in that West Brom game. They should have scored, they should have got something out of the game, and it was just missing a lot of chances. And I think you certainly touched on it there, the confidence factor. I think Sheffield United are the perfect example of that, because with pretty much the same team last season, they were winning games, they were flying high, they were had all the confidence in the world, and you'd back them to go and beat, or at least get a point from, or give a really good game to any team in the league. Whereas at the moment, you're looking at these games against West Brom as must-win games because you don't see where the next point is coming from after that. So I think that's the main. You talk about confidence in football, and it's obviously key. And as you mentioned, there are a lot of other factors as well. But when you've got a team like Sheffield United, who are essentially the same bunch that did so well last season and winning every game, and then lockdown hits, the original lockdown, and then they just lose all that momentum. And then after lockdown, they're losing so many games, because this form, it's not just this season, it stretches back to the end of last season as well. They just seem to have completely lost all of that confidence. And I think they need to get a point on the board. Even a draw at this stage would be better than anything. Just get those points on the board. As you say, 5 points to West Brom is by no means an unassailable gap. They can still stay up. But 2 wins changes the picture completely for them. But it's increasingly hard to see where those wins are coming from.
Yeah, I think that's the point. I mean, look at their next few games. We're just having a quick scan. Sheffield United play Leicester, Southampton, and Manchester United in their next 3, and before going to Brighton. And it's over the festive period, December becomes February very, very quickly, and they find themselves, it's all very well saying, I mean, I'm guilty of saying this, that it's early in the season, it's very early, 10 games into the season now. It's not like, and it will suddenly become 17, 18 games, and suddenly you find yourselves in trouble. And I mean, we got a question on WhatsApp, probably fits in quite nicely of what we're speaking at in terms of from Kierat on WhatsApp, what do the teams near the bottom need to do in terms of signings in January? And probably the short answer to that is, sign a player that scores.
Exactly,
I was actually thinking about this the other day. I mean, there's a player who was at Peterborough last season, Even Tony, and Brentford took him from Peterborough this season. He's been flying in the Championship, and I thought there was players like that around. But it's very difficult to sign a goal scorer, isn't it? Because a lot of players want goal scorers. Sheffield United obviously bought in Brewster, didn't they, from Liverpool? And they're scanning around. The problem with buying goals is goals cost money, and goals are usually at the bigger clubs, aren't they? So you need to find a player that's going to come in and score goals. Obviously, West Brom spent a lot of money on Grant over the summer. Fulham have got Mitrovic up there. Burnley are not going to be able to go and spend 20 million, are they, on a striker? Obviously, they've got players up there, Chris Wood, Rodriguez, that can score goals for Burnley. But I mean, goals is what I think they need, because if you've got a player down there that can find the back of the net, 10 goals this season, 8, 9 Premier League goals, that's going to get you out, isn't it? But in terms of what you can do in January, it's difficult, isn't it?
It is. It's really difficult for those teams, because obviously players are going to be looking at their plight as well and thinking, all right, are these teams going to get relegated? Am I going to join a Premier League club and be playing Championship football in 6 months? And certainly, you look at their goals scored: 7 goals for West Brom, 4 for Burnley from 9 games, 9 for Fulham, and 4 for Sheffield United as well in terms of goals scored. That is where it's crying out, where they need more goal scorers. And as you say, it's so hard. The difficulty with someone like Even Tony is it's obviously a risk, and Brentford deserve great credit for taking that risk. But jumping up from, what was it, League One he was in last season, to the Premier League is a huge jump up, and there's no guarantee he's going to do it. So if you're paying millions for him, as Peterborough demanded, because he was so important to them, then it's a big risk. And Brentford took that risk and is paying off for them, because he's done brilliantly. And if Brentford don't go and get promoted this season, they're probably going to sell him on for more money into the Premier League, like they did with Ollie Watkins. And obviously he's doing well in the Premier League, but it is that risk. And you can understand why, certainly after the coronavirus pandemic, clubs with who might be threatened by relegation didn't want to take that risk by spending a lot of money on strikers unproven at the top level. But yeah, that's where they need to strengthen. They need to get more goals in the team. Every team down there, the common thread is that they're struggling with goals. Obviously, shipping goals at the other end as well. But I think that's even more difficult to fix in the January transfer market. I think they need a strike force. But as you mentioned some there, I think Chris Wood, Ashley Barnes, they've proven and Jay Rodriguez have proven they can score at this level. I think Brewster is a good goal scorer. I think he's probably one suffering with confidence, and he needs a good goal under his belt. But Sheffield United, didn't score many goals last season, but did a lot better, so they probably need to improve at the back. Fulham, you'd say Alexander Mitrovic is good enough for this level, so they've got these goal scorers. West Brom are probably the one without a standout goal scorer like that. For me, I'm not sure Carlin Grant is cut out for this level. Certainly shown signs, but I'm not sure when you talk about strikers being good enough to keep teams in leagues like maybe Callum Wilson. I know he didn't with Bournemouth last season, but he's going to get a certain amount of goals per season. I'm not sure West Brom got that, but you'd say teams like Fulham do. So again, it's so difficult for them at the bottom of the table.
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking when you're saying it, I mean, could one of those sides go and get a Josh King, someone like that in January? Obviously, West Ham look at him, and you fancy Josh King if he's going to move on. That he'll move on maybe to a mid-table Premier League club rather than one struggling. But yeah, you mentioned West Brom. Obviously, they've got players, haven't they? Austin, Robson, Kanu, Robinson. Robinson's come up with a couple this season, but it's the old age, isn't it? Like I was mentioning earlier, it's goals that they need, and you're looking about, can you loan? Could you get a loan player from from an Everton? I suppose like when Palace took Chen Toussaint on loan, and he obviously didn't do fantastic there. And to get a striker in that's going to be better than what you've got and is going to potentially upset someone who's already in the squad but's not going to do as well, very, very difficult. And like you say, the goals this season, obviously they've conceded a lot, but West Brom have tightened up defensively recently, but they're not going to be able to win 1-0 every week. So West Brom are going to have to learn to, or not learn, it's probably the wrong word, but they're going to have to know that they're going to have to concede and then win games. Can you win a game 2-1? Can you win a game 3-2? Can you take a 2-2 against someone? And you can't, rely on keeping clean sheets every week, because it's just not going to happen. But obviously down there, very interesting. We've got another question on WhatsApp, Barney, and if you want to read that one out.
Yeah, this is a good one, actually. If a team other than Man City or Liverpool won the Premier League this season, would there need to be an asterisk next to it? That's from Lucy on WhatsApp. What do you think to that one?
Yeah, interesting one, actually, isn't it? If a team would have won, would there need to be? I mean, it's a very good question, isn't it? In terms of, I mean, do I think Liverpool are not going to win the league this season? I mean, I said that I didn't think they would before they signed Thiago. it's a difficult question, isn't it? Because could you say, do you still think Liverpool win the league this season?
Well, yeah, I mean the injuries have made it a lot harder, but I think they've still got the ability to be more consistent when you bring Trent back into it, when you bring Thiago back into it. These are injuries which are not long term. The two big long term ones are obviously Van Dijk and Joe Gomez, which is obviously our two first choice centre backs, which is a bit debilitating at the back, but. The fact that we've got, we had 10 out for the Leicester game, 9 out for the Brighton game, probably 8 out next time. That's not going to last the entire season. So once you got Thiago in particular back, I can't wait to see him back. Liverpool are going to look like a strong team again, and I think they'd be more consistent than the other teams. Whether there be an asterisk next to it, it's obviously a different season. I think it depends how you define. Why would you put an asterisk next to it? Would you put next to Leicester because all the other teams had such poor seasons? I don't think so. But I think this season, the fact that it's all crammed in, it's a season like no other. Teams play. Obviously, we've said it. The schedule is packed in tighter than it's ever been before, and so many injuries. I don't think there'll be an asterisk next to it because at the end of the day, if you go 38 games and pick up more points than the rest, you deserve to win the league. But I think it's certainly going to be a season like no other, and just because Chelsea or Tottenham might win the league this season, I think the following season, I don't know if you'd be as confident of them going and retaining the title, because you'd expect the likes of Liverpool and Man City in a normal season to be a lot stronger than they have been so far this season. Because last season when Man City weren't anywhere near their best, and certainly the season before they were head and shoulders above the rest, and I don't think in a normal season the other teams have closed the gap as much. But every team is pretty much battling with the same circumstances at the moment. So if someone wins the league after 38 games, they deserve it. So I don't think there would be an asterisk next to it, to be honest.
I suppose the fans obviously coming back in for the London clubs will obviously help. It's obviously not a great deal of fans, but clubs, Manchester United and City, obviously not going to be able to have their fans in the wrong tier at the moment. Not going to be able to have those in. But I suppose that gives a little bit of an advantage to the London clubs, maybe heading into January and February. But we do hope that the second half of the season is more normal, isn't it? And I suppose, like you say, it's still different, but it's still a 38 game season. It's still 90 minutes. It's still two teams up against each other. It's still football at the end of the day, and it will be very interesting to see whether someone else has won it. One team I don't think was going to win the league this season is Arsenal. I think they've fallen behind them. They barney to Wolves. I think they might have just equalised actually. They fell behind to Pedro Neto, but it looks like there's an equaliser that might have just flown in. Looks like quite a good game there after the Jimenez injury. But Arsenal, another team, will obviously be looking to move up the league, because we've spoken about it before. They've not been great this season, have they?
Well, we mentioned earlier those lower scorers in the league. Arsenal and Wolves are the only other teams yet to be in double figures in the league, apart from that bottom four in terms of goal scoring. So yeah, they're down in 14th at the start of that game. Far too inconsistent. I certainly don't think they're in the title-winning picture. I think there's only still a handful of teams in the title-winning picture. I don't expect someone like Leicester, or there was talk Everton early in the season. Obviously, they lost to Leeds. I don't think a team like that is going to be consistent as some of the top teams. So I don't think they'll go into the title-winning picture. But I think a different team, the likes of Chelsea or Tottenham, if they can find that consistency, which they seem to have in recent weeks, I certainly think they're more in the conversation.
Yeah, it was an equaliser for Arsenal. It was Gabriel who's got his name on the score sheet, half hour gone in that game. So it's it looks a good game. But yeah, I think that's the point really. It's not going to be like you mentioned, a really open season. No team's going to run away with it. I don't think Liverpool are good enough this season to run away with it. And I'm not saying United could win the league, but if United could push themselves up, in and around that top four at the moment, and obviously you'd fancy Southampton to maybe drop down a touch as well as they've played this season. But yeah, I'm still with you. I still think there's, 4 teams that could win it. I mean, do I think someone other than Liverpool, City, Chelsea or Tottenham will win the league this season? Don't think so. No, I think it will come from one of those 4 sides. But to be fair, I've already said I don't think City will win. If you had to put me on the spot right now with any confidence, I would probably, unfortunately, back Liverpool.
Yeah, you would.
To say that. I probably would, because I'm still not sure about Tottenham defensively. I'm still not 100% convinced by Chelsea in the big games. As you mentioned before, their performances in the big games are not. The performances are okay, but it's not really translating into any serious points at this stage. So I probably would say Liverpool, but I wouldn't be surprised if Chelsea or Tottenham did come up with a win. And certainly, I think it'd be good for the league as well.
Yeah, I think in this season, without injury problems, I think there wouldn't be any question mark in my head with Liverpool if they can go and win the title with those with Van Dijk and Gomez out for the large chunk of the season. That is fantastic work from them, I think. All right, we'll call that a day for now. Thank you very much, Matt, as ever. Thank you all for watching as well, and for your WhatsApp messages and any YouTube comments. Matt and I will be back again on Friday to give our weekly Premier League predictions, which is very tight at the moment. It's been a difficult game week. I don't think we've done too well this week, but it's very tight as things stand. It seems to be changing every week. But before that, there's more Premier League games, of course. There's one obviously going on now tonight. There's two on Monday night as well. And you've got Champions League Tuesday, Wednesday, Europa League on Thursday, Championship in midweek as well. We've got previews of all those games and games around European leagues as well, domestically. So you can check out them on sportsmo.co.uk. Thanks again, everyone, for watching, and hopefully we'll see you again soon.